Hi guys, welcome back to the Astro Imaging channel. Tonight's session is on image auto-guiding. Auto-guiding without guide stars, kind of a new form of auto-guiding. It's going to be presented by Bob Majewski. But as always, before we go into that, I do want to show off our image of the week, which is actually a really cool image. And I'm hoping in the future, if it's not next week, maybe we'll get to talk about this image a lot, because I don't know, I'm kind of blown away by this. The Smiling Lens, and it's a collaboration by Josh Smith, Craig Smith, and Eric Coles. And yeah, they actually captured a gravitational lens target, and they revealed a good portion of the structure of it. This is one of those that I'm going to really strongly suggest you check out either on our website or Josh posted it on his Astrobin. Astrobin's probably the best because you'll get the high res of it. And yeah, it's a really impressive target. I'm not going to go into the long description of it beyond that, because as I said, I'm hoping we're going to hear a lot more about this in a future session. But, as always, Josh or Eric are welcome to speak about it probably next week, but we'll see when we get to that. That said, I am going to take my screen back and basically hand it right over to Bob. So, Bob.
Hi, Adam.
Hello. All right, you know the drill. So basically, you can start off. I'll help you when you need to screen share.
Okay, before I go to my desktop, you might notice in the lower left-hand corner there's an SPIG STI camera that I hope to make use of later. So anyways, okay, let me try to get the screen up. Let's see, I just click on it. Okay, now what? Oh, I click on the desktop. Is that the start
yeah,
screen share?
I think it's called desktop for you.
Okay, yep. We got it?
Yep.
Okay, let me bring up the charts first. Let's see if I can do that without dropping the connection. That's the key here. And I think I've solved the cursor problem. Okay, let's try slide share. Okay, does that look good?
Looks perfect.
Looks perfect. Okay, and you can see the little cursor?
And I see your cursor, yes.
Great. Okay, well, let me first give you guys a little bit of background before I launch into the talk, just so you know where I'm coming from. I'm a retired physicist engineer. I work for Raytheon and Hughes Aircraft Company on a whole bunch of different imaging systems. And so the stuff I'm going to be talking about was actually my day job back then. But I've been a lifelong amateur astronomer. When I was a teenager, I used 8-inch telescopes visually. But let me make one slight confession here. I'm not actually an astro-imager. I'm really more interested in photometry and exoplanet transits. But the thing we have in common is we need to auto-guide, okay? And I went over this quite a bit and came to the conclusion that for the requirements for exoplanet transits, you really have, your whole signal is maybe 1% or something like that. So you really need sub-10%. And getting flat fields good enough, you're just fooling yourself if you think you can really do it. I could talk at length at that on another talk, but anyways, what I decided that you need, and what NASA decided for the Kepler mission, was you need essentially perfect auto-guiding for a long period of time. So I went through a campaign of a number of different methods of auto-guiding and had issues with them, and then finally decided maybe there's a better way to do it, and invented image auto-guiding. Okay, so that's what I'm going to talk about. And what's different about it is it doesn't use guide stars. Now, that doesn't mean I don't use stars, but I don't use one star in particular that we're centroid tracking on it. So that's the distinction. In fact, the method will basically track on anything, really, that has some structure. Okay, so let's go over, maybe you'll get something out of the theory behind this and the thinking, even if the final thing doesn't intrigue you that much. But anyways, why do we need to auto-guide? Well, obviously, we would like to have the images stay fixed for some period of time on the focal plane. But what prevents us from doing that? Well, a number of things. I mean, one, polar misalignment. If the axis of your equatorial mount is not parallel to the Earth, you'll get drift, and you get drift both in right ascension and declination. Most of the amateur mounts use gears, like worm gears, and you have periodic air that's going to knock you off. In addition to that, the structures will distort as you're tracking a target during the evening. The elevation angle of the telescope is going to change. So things like the secondary mirror support, it will bend a little bit. But I mean, like for example, my camera, my S-Big camera has 9 micron pixels. You can imagine it doesn't take much of a distortion, kind of a bending to give you sub-pixel or even multiple pixel drift. And also the temperature drops during the evening. So you have all these things that are going to knock you off. If you only need to guide for just a few minutes, you can probably get by, without any of this fancy stuff. But for exoplanet transits, I have to keep tracking for maybe 3 hours, and I want to stay there, to sub-arc second accuracy over that period of time. All right, so what are the common configurations that are commonly used? Well, the guide telescope, the off-axis guider, and the ONAG are 3 ones that that I've actually used. Can you guys, if there are questions or something, will I be able to hear it? I don't hear anything from you.
Yeah, if we get any questions, I'll call them right out to you.
Oh, okay, because I was just afraid maybe you disappeared here. Okay, so let me go through these different ones briefly. I'm sure you guys are all aware of this. I don't want to bore the heck out of you here, but anyways, the guide telescope. Okay, what's that? Well, you have a little, here's a Schmidt-Cassegrain, and on the side of it, you mount a small telescope with its own guide camera. And the big advantage of this configuration is that you have a wide field of view with the guide camera. Okay, so it makes it relatively easy to find guide stars. Okay, that's the good news. The really bad news about this configuration is something called differential flexure. The optical axis of the little guide scope can drift relative to that of the main camera. So that one, in my experience, I've tried this and tried tightening up the structure, and I even use this with a little TeleVue telescope I have, and I couldn't get less than maybe 10 pixels of drift over a couple of hours. So I think that almost anybody, if they have to go for hours, is really that's like a state-of-the-art thing to get that differential drift low. And the other disadvantage too is you might find a guide star quite easily with the guide camera, but it might be maybe 1-2 degrees or something away from where you want to track. So if you have poor polar misalignment, if you're off a significant amount from the pole, you will of course track that star that's off to the side, but you'll get image rotation about that offset point. So in the region you're interested in, you might get motion, you might get a smearing effect or a drift over time because you're tracking an offset point. So I decided that no, the guide telescope is probably not what I want. All right. How about offset guiding? That's a fairly popular one, I guess. I don't know. Not being an astro imager, I don't know exactly what you guys do, but anyways, the big advantage of this one is you're using the same main optical system for both the main camera and the guide camera. The guide camera is seeing the main imaging optics through a little pickoff mirror. Okay, now so what you're doing here is, since you're using the same optical system, if you have something like a Schmidt-Cassegrain, and here you have some mirror flop, you get a mirror flop in both the guide camera and the main camera. So that's the good part. The bad part is that the field of view is small over here, so it makes it hard to find that little 9th or 10th magnitude star or whatever you're trying to use. You might have to rotate the thing around, and you're guaranteed that you're going to use an offset point because the guide camera is offset from the center of the field of view. I mean, that's a given in this configuration. And most optical systems like this are aberrated at the edge of the field of view, or outside the field of view, actually. You're going to have things like coma and astigmatism that will degrade the Strel and reduce your signal-to-noise ratio. So frankly, I tried this one and gave up pretty quickly because I just decided it was way too hard to find those guide stars. Okay, well, I spent a bunch of money and I bought something called an ONAG. I don't know if you guys use that, but basically what that stands for is on-axis guiding. And the way that works is they give you a dichroic beam splitter that splits the light such that the main camera sees the imagery in the visible and the guide camera sees it in the near infrared. Okay, so the big advantage is that you can be on axis. So hopefully, and they claim that you have a wide field of view to cover. You can translate the little guide camera around. And I discovered, I used it, and frankly, of the 3 different ones, I decided it was the best. It had lower differential flexure, but not perfect. Even after like 3 hours, I could see maybe a pixel or 2 of drift, which, you know, may be okay, but for exoplanets, you know, the gain of the star might change if I start moving on to another pixel. So, okay, that wasn't so good. And but the disadvantages are because you only get a fraction of the photons because you're in the near infrared, and also because you're looking through the beam splitter, you're getting astigmatism in there. You got a reduced SNR. So I found it still difficult to find those guide stars. So all the 3 methods I talked to all require this guide star, the one bright star, all right, that you centroid track on. And typically you use short exposures, like maybe 1 to 10 seconds. And I think the main reason for that is because if your mount has periodic air, and like I use a Losmandy G11, I've discovered that, okay, it's not the world's best mount. It's not terrible, but it's not the world's best. And if I want to keep the periodic air low, I have to keep it on a short leash. And that means like maybe 5 seconds or something like that if I really want to keep it pretty low. Okay, so that's not great, but that's kind of like the facts of life with a mount. And the other thing is with short exposures, the stars are going to jitter around. So part of the tracking noise is going to be generated not just by photon shot noise from the star of interest, but the turbulence-driven jitter. And the guide star that you're finding needs to be pretty close to where you want to track. All right, so I asked myself the question, why are you just using this one star? Okay, you might have a camera that has a fairly wide field of view, and there's a lot of stuff in there, a lot of stars, maybe nebula, stuff like that, and you're only using this one star. Why not guide in everything? That was the question I asked, and the answer now is you can. Okay, or maybe I can. I guess that's the point here. I call it image autoguiding, and I'll tell you a little bit about how it works in a moment. But the big advantage to me is I don't have to look for those guide stars. I just hit the guide button and it starts guiding, and it guides about the center of the field of view, not some offset position. It also averages over the atmospheric position jitter. And it also works very well with undersampled systems, which you know, probably a lot of amateurs are using. Okay, now let me explain the methodology here. I hope I'll not put you to sleep here. It's very mathematical, but I just want to give you a real quick, broad brush of how it works. It makes use of Fourier transforms. And okay, and I'm not going to explain Fourier transforms in this lecture here, but basically the image is broken down into sinusoidal components with different spatial frequencies, and what that means is cycles per millimeter, or more specifically, cycles per pixel. And what the theorem says, it makes use of the Fourier transform shift theorem, okay? And what that theorem says, and I'm showing you in 1 dimension, although obviously we want 2 dimensions, but it says that if you were to take a 1-dimensional transform of an image that's shifted, okay, h shifted of f, it is equal to the unshifted version, h of f, times this complex exponential. Exponential of 2 pi I is the square root of -1, the famous imaginary number, times the spatial frequency times the shift, x naught, the image shift that we're trying to find. Okay, so this quantity inside of here I call the phase shift. So the name of the game is if you can find the phase shift as a function of spatial frequency. Okay, here's the simple little formula. It says that the slope of that line is 2 pi times the shift. So the whole thing comes down to basically take the Fourier transforms. Well, here's kind of the basic theory. It says take one image, take its transform as a reference, divide that into the Fourier transform of the nth image, solve for the phase shift, okay, plot it out. We don't literally have to make the plot, but anyways, at the low spatial frequency end, you will get kind of a linear region, find the slope, that gives you the shift, all right? Now you might be looking at this thing and wondering, what is all that garbage on the right-hand side? Well, what's going on is that when we're doing our imaging, you know, we've got the stars and nebula up there, but we also have this nasty atmosphere, and that atmosphere has a significant radiance, you know, from man-made lights and all sorts of different things. And so that's raining photons down on the whole focal plane, and that's producing white noise all over the place. The star and constellation, the distribution of the star detail is down at low spatial frequency. So the algorithm basically works down here, it ignores all this garbage over here, and estimates that slope to find the image shift. So basically what we're doing is we're replacing a centroid calculation with this kind of methodology working in 2 dimensions. Okay, probably said more than enough on that, but that's the basic idea. And to give you an idea of the precision of the measurement here, I took some data. I've been lately using a 8-inch f5 Newtonian. It has a carbon fiber tube. I started off using a Schmidt-Cassegrain, but I didn't like the fact that it had vignetting and it goes out of focus when the temperature drops only a little bit. So I put together a new one, and I've been using a ST402 camera. It's not a huge camera, but if you're doing photometry, you don't really need, you know, you just need the main target and comparison stars. But anyways, this shows the performance I was getting from the algorithm. And FFTs work best in powers of 2. So typically I use either one 256 by 256 region, or essentially the average of 6 of them. And my baseline right now is this, is the average of 6. And it shows the error, the standard deviation in angular position as a function of exposure. And you can see even down by 1 second, here I'm going less than 1/10 of an arc second and almost down to 100th at 10 seconds exposure. So I think that's fantastic. It's exceeds what's really needed. Right now, I'll show you the performance and tracking, and it's closer to like about 1/2 an arc second. So it's up here. But the main culprit is the Lozman G11 here. It's you've got this kind of relatively crude piece of equipment that you're kind of poking and pushing around. All right. So the position measurement for reasonable amounts of exposure, I think, is doing very well. Okay, let me say a little bit about atmospheric turbulence. Well, you guys can chime in if I'm boring the heck out of you. But anyways, what's going on over here is let's say we're looking at a star and it's producing plane waves that are approaching our telescope. Okay, here's a plot of the strength of the turbulence in the atmosphere as a function of altitude. And typically there'll be layers, like this is the jet stream up here at many kilometers, but there are other layers lower down that can cause the wave fronts that approach the telescope to become crinkly. Instead of flat, outside the atmosphere, they're like flat sheets, but as it passes through the atmosphere, because the index of refraction is a little bit different at this spot than this spot, the speed of light is a little faster here, so the wave front moves ahead and you get this distorted shape. Now it has two big effects that we're worried about. One is wavefront error, okay, RMS wavefront error, and what you'll see is here's a small telescope and a bigger one. So think maybe 3 inches and 12 inches or something like that. And so what it's telling you is in a small telescope, what happens is for example, in a 3-inch telescope, what you're going to see is an airy disk that's not distorted that much, but it dances around quite a bit, okay? But if you look through an 8 or 12-inch, what you see is, yeah, it dances around, not as much, but it's more distorted. I mean, in fact, you can barely tell that it's an airy disk at all. And if you were looking through a meter-sized telescope, I personally haven't, but what you would see is kind of a Gaussian distribution that's all boily and speckly, but it's not really dancing around much.
Bob,
But yes?
can I ask you one question that's lighting up chat right now?
Okay.
I think you might get to it, but it's going to give people some context. They're asking, do you do this with a guide scope, or have you been using your on-axis guider for this?
Okay. Well, what I'm going to lead up to is image autoguiding has something I call the zero drift mode. And I've been using the main camera as the guide camera. Okay. I mean, right now I'm just talking about the general theory of how atmospheric turbulence affects us. But does that answer your question, or
if you're going to get to it, you're going to get to it. There's a lot of people in chat that were asking about it and then kind of debating and going into stuff. I just thought it would give them some context. But if you're going to get into it, all the better.
Okay. Well, keep hitting me with questions here, because I mean, there's lots of different side discussions here. Like, for example, I mean, you could talk about, adaptive optics and things like that. There's nothing in here that's adaptive optics. The whole thrust of this presentation is just how to best control the mount. So a discussion about like planetary lucky imaging, which I've done, by the way, is another subject here. So I'm not talking about beating the turbulence. What I'm discussing is how does the turbulence affect our ability to control the mount. So one important parameter is called the Fried parameter, and R0, which characterizes the coherence length of the turbulence. Okay, what that means is what distance across the aperture is more or less uniform in phase shift. That's what it's saying. So what it's saying is that for a little telescope like this, R0 is larger than the diameter of it. So the telescope is functioning pretty much diffraction limited. But in a bigger scope like this, maybe 8 or 12-inch or something, the aperture has several regions of size R0, and so you're getting constructive interference and destructive interference between them that's messing up the airy disk. So you're not getting that. And but the thrust here on both centroid tracking and image autoguiding is the thing that we're worried about the most is the position jitter. Okay, I mean, yeah, we get this distortion of the point spread function, but we can't really fix that here. But if the thing dances around and you centroid track on it, that's going to cause error in estimating where the star is. And there's something called the isoplanetic angle for image motion. I'll explain that more on the next chart, but it's and really what that is the angular scale for which the jitter is correlated is proportional to d, the aperture of the scope, over the strength of the turbulence. Now let me just kind of explain that. If you have two stars that are close together, like 2 arc seconds apart, and you could watch what's going on, you'll discover that they jitter pretty much the same amount. In fact, they're kind of blurred almost the same. But if you look at a star that's an arc minute apart, it's going to be rather different. It's going to have a different blur shape. It's going to have a different jitter. Okay, so you can see this kind of a thing if I'm sure all of us have like looked at the moon, for the fairly wide field of view, and it looks like you're looking through water. It's looking like you're looking through waves. Well, what that's saying is that if you're looking at regions further apart in angle, the region of that, because you can kind of think of the atmosphere as like sheets moving across your aperture. So it really is a fairly good approximation to imagine you're looking like you were looking at into a little stream, and you're watching the waves on the stream, and you're trying to see the bottom of the stream. That's kind of what's going on here. And the significance this has for us here is that if you centroid track on that single star, you're going to get that jitter. if you take a long exposure, you can average over it, okay? But because of things like periodic air in the gears, we tend to keep the guide exposures short to try to keep a leash on the drive. But that means we're going to be subject to that jitter, okay? But the thing is, actually, in image auto-guiding, the big advantage of that is that the jitter that's occurring, if you have a fairly wide field of view, and you're effectively averaging over all that jitter, image auto-guiding is going to have an advantage over tracking a single star. Because if you have stars that are more widely separated, I mean, if you just look on this guy and he's jittering around a certain way, but if you average his motion to a lot of other stars that are jittering differently, the average is going to have less jitter. The standard deviation is going to be reduced because you're doing that averaging, and image auto-guiding inherently does that. Okay. All right, now let me talk a little bit about undersampled systems. What undersampling is that the optical system is producing this image structure on the focal plane, and the detectors are sampling that. And if that sampling is too coarse, that's called undersampling, and what happens is you get aliasing that gives you false information about the image. And one classic example of this in the time domain region is, I'm sure everybody has seen a video or a movie of a car going by, and it looks like the wheels are spinning backwards. It's that the frame rate of the camera is too slow to capture properly that the wheels are really spinning forward. All right. So let's get some idea of whether that's a problem or not. This is the condition for oversampling. Okay. Basically, what it says is that the F number should be greater than twice the pixel width over the wavelength. Okay. Let me give you an example here, like from my SD402 camera. It has 9 micron detectors, and let's say we're in the middle of the visible at 550 nanometers. If we were diffraction limited, that would say that the F number should be greater than 33. You know, you're probably gulping and saying, what? You know, my telescope, no, we're not that high. Now, if you were doing planetary lucky imaging, that's in fact what you want to do. Okay, you really do, if you want to capture all the information that's there, you really want to do that. But if you're centroid tracking or image auto-guiding, there's a safety. I can't explain the math. I don't even have a simple intuitive way to understand that. But it basically says that no, you really, half of that is good enough. So what that says is that as long as you're above f16, you're fine. Now you might still say, what? That's still not the greatest here. If you're less than that and you're diffraction limited, you'll see a nonlinear transfer function. But I'll explain in a moment why it's not quite that bad. But let me first explain why I'm even worrying about this. And what it amounts to is this: is that if you calculate, here's the centroid calculation. If you calculate the centroid of a star and you plot the centroid value as a function of the true position, if you're completely oversampled, you know, if you have that really high F number I'm talking about, well, you will get this linear relationship. The true, and I'm ignoring noise in the system, you will get the dotted line. You know that 0.2 pixels true position will give you 0.2 on the centroid. But if you're badly undersampled enough, you'll get a response that looks like this kind of an S-curve. All right. And I'll show you an example, a worst case example. The worst case example is imagine if you had basically a delta function or a optical point spread function sitting on a detector. If you moved it across the detector, the output would just come from that one detector was hitting until you got halfway, and then it would suddenly jump to the next one. So you get like a stair-step response. Well, that's obviously not too good for the control system. I mean, for example, let's say the true position is here, the centroid is telling you this is the correction you want to make. You make that, but you really should have done this amount instead because that's really where the star was. All right. Now, I'll explain why image auto-guiding works better on this than you would on centroid tracking. Okay, well, here's an example of what it looks like. Here's an example of so-called critical sampling. And what that means is that the MTF of the system drops to 0 at the Nyquist spatial frequency of 0.5. If you're oversampled, it's dropping to 0 well before Nyquist. Here it's dropping down to the sampling frequency of 1 cycle per pixel. It turns out, though, that you can really get away with down to here and not have much of a problem with centroid tracking, but don't go below this. All right. In fact, one little trick that I have done with my when I ran in the guide telescope mode is I would get an image that would look something like this or worse. Okay, with that little Borg 2-inch diameter refractor on there. That thing was basically f5 was typically kind of undersampling. So I just deliberately defocus it by about 1/10 of a millimeter to make it look more like this, and the guiding improves if you do that. Oh, you don't want to go too far with defocus, but just a little bit helps. Okay, now one other thing here is that now I might have scared you a little bit about f16 or something, but here's an example for my system. Here's what an f5 with 9 micron detectors looks like for the optics. Okay, here's modulation versus spatial frequency. Here's Nyquist. Okay, here's 1 cycle per pixel. The cutoff in the visible is actually out at 3 1/4. Okay, so you might look at that and say, "Oh my goodness, that's terrible." You know, you could be aliasing like crazy. And the answer is, yeah, you would if it wasn't for atmospheric turbulence here. Even a fair-seeing situation, the MTF of the turbulence is really more like this red line. So the total is really the product of these two. So the upshot is, and as I said, it isn't the Nyquist frequency, it's 1 cycle per pixel is kind of the limit. So you can see instead of this, we're in this situation here. So I don't know if you followed everything I'm saying, is basically what I'm trying to tell you is, okay, f5, relax, you know, if you got an 8-inch or bigger telescope, oops, it's not as bad as you think. You're not really here. It's really more like there. But don't necessarily think that, you know, you really have to consider what's happening in any one case here. You could violate that. All right. So one thing to notice about this curve here is that if you have a distribution of stars, some of them are going to be in this situation and some are going to be in this situation. So if you kind of average over all those cases, you can get an improvement. So I did a little experiment here. I created a 128 by 128 simulated reference image with 200 stars in it that are horribly aliased. The f sub c is at infinity. These are just single lit up pixels, okay, like a hot pixel, okay, except when I moved it, I would calculate the high precision position, but then round it to the nearest position. So what that would do with centroid tracking is you'd have this kind of response, like I just described. But then I ran the image autoguiding algorithm on it, and I got this curve instead, because it averaged over all the things, all those phasings that were occurring. It looks funny here, and this distribution has to do with the choice of random star positions. So the upshot is, because you're averaging once again over a larger region, these kind of errors are minimized. Okay. All right. Now that I put everybody to sleep. Okay. Now, because in this exoplanet transit thing that I'm interested in, I would really like to have zero drift. And how can I do that? Well, the idea I had here is, suppose that the imaging camera and the guide camera are the same camera. Okay, well, there's going to be flexure, but no differential flexure. Okay, so that problem is solved. With image autoguiding, we're guiding on the center of the field of view. But if you're going to do this, you know, you don't really want to be, you know, just taking 3-second exposures and, you know, saving them away in the FITS files. What I would do, for example, is, well, in the current setup that I'm running, I would typically take 15-second exposures, take 4 of them, sum them into RAM memory, and then after the minute is over with, I save that image as a FITS file. that's kind of what I'm doing lately. But the zero drift mode, I'm sure some of you are probably thinking, what the heck is he talking about here? If you don't do this with any help, you're kind of in a bind here, because you're saying, well, I want to keep the exposure short to reduce the periodic error. But if you do that, and also if you have a big field of view, you're going to take an image, you're going to have to download it to do the calculation. So you're going to waste time downloading it, doing the calculation. So you may wind up having a small duty factor of collecting photons, which is not a good thing, okay? And if you read out a lot of times, you're going to have a lot of read noise. Because you've read more times than instead of 1 minute exposure. If you did it in 23-second exposures, you had the 20 reads. Okay, so we don't want to do that. So the approaches to avoid that are getting a good mount, using periodic error correction, or using a high resolution encoder on the right ascension axis with feedback to try to kill the periodic error. And that's kind of the latest thing that I'm doing. I've got something called the Telescope Drive Master that does this, but for the long-term drift, I mean, this by itself isn't going to get you to 3 hours, it's just going to fix your periodic error. So you still need the image autoguiding to keep eliminating the drift in the system. So here's an autoguiding example. Okay, I'm using this 8-inch f5 Newtonian SD402 camera, the Drive Master, to knock down the periodic error. The mount is a Losman DG11. I'm doing 15-second exposures. Like I said, I take maybe 4 of them for a minute's worth and save that as a FITS file. So here's the performance I'm getting in right ascension and declination. Average, oops. Okay, I don't know, it's kind of stupid. Some of these programmers, if you click down on the mouse, it moves to the next slide. That doesn't seem like too swift to me. But anyways, the average error here is 1/100th of an arc second over this almost 2 hours. The standard deviation is 0.45 arc seconds. Okay, so you can see here's arc seconds, here's time in seconds, here's about an hour, and there's out to 2. So you can see every 15 seconds it's calculating the position and feeding it back to the mount. Meanwhile, the Telescope Drive Master 5 times a second is tweaking the mount to cut down on periodic error. And the performance and declination was nearly the same. And I looked at the FITS images, and sure enough, they were just like rock steady. The only thing I could see happening is you'd see cosmic ray hits come up once in a while. So I don't know, I think it's pretty good. And here's an example. This was done prior to using the Telescope Drive Master when I had shorter integration times. But this is an exoplanet transit of TRES-2b. Here's one of the FITS images, and there's the little star itself that I was taking the data on, and some of these other ones were used as a comparison. So here it shows you what the dip in brightness as the planet got in front of the star. It lasted about 90 minutes, and it was a drop of a little more than 0.0, I think 0.017 or 8 or something, drop in magnitude. And it was an 11th magnitude star over here in where I live in Las Vegas. So that's doing pretty well. I'd like to do better here, but okay, so what is image autoguiding in a nutshell? Well, basically what it is kind of a few things, but the main thing is using a Fourier analysis algorithm to replace the centroid calculation. Okay, and the big thing is no guide stars required in here. And then in addition to that, you don't have to use this zero drift mode, by the way. That's kind of like a separate add-on here. If you really want to stay locked on, I guess if you're doing astroimaging, you want to break it up into a number of separate pieces. You may not need that. But in that mode, I'm using the main camera also as the guide camera. Okay, where is it? Right now, it exists probably, unfortunately for a lot of you, only as a Macintosh application because, and I'm the author. Because I'm a Mac guy, and I'm not up to speed on doing things on Windows and PCs. And the other thing too is it currently also runs only with S-Big cameras because I've got their development kit. I've been running it on, I've been doing the development under the Snow Leopard operating system, but I've also have run the program under Mavericks, and on the computer that I have right here, it's running under El Capitan. So there's, and I've written it so that it supports exoplanet transits primarily. So there isn't a whole lot of stuff here for astroimagers, at least not yet. So for example, there's no focus or field wheel support, but that could be added. I mean, the filter wheel support could probably fairly easily be added. And I guess what I might be interested in is if other people want to play around with it and give me feedback for the Mac application, that would be great. It would be great to find somebody else who might want to take the algorithm and put it into a Windows version. And there's my email address. Okay, after that, I was planning on showing you the application, but if you have some questions right now, go ahead.
Robert, this is Eric. I'm sure we're all sitting here with about the same question. If in a normal image we're doing 15-minute exposures, how exactly would your system work for guiding?
Oh, wait a minute. So you're not talking about my 15 seconds. You're saying if you were to take a 15-minute exposure?
10, 15-minute, or I take 30 minutes. It just depends.
Well,
how exactly would the system work?
Well, with or without the zero drift mode?
Without the zero drift mode.
Well, I mean, you could run image autoguiding on if you have a separate on the guide telescope, for example. I mean, if you have the little telescope on the side, it could be running image autoguiding, and you could have that thing running at whatever rate that you want. Okay,
so in other words, if we have an off-axis guider or a separate guide telescope, we could be taking pictures with that camera and then running it through your algorithm and sending signals to the mount for guiding.
Yeah, it doesn't, I mean, think of it, it is only replacing the centroid calculation. So if you're doing centroid tracking with a guide telescope or off-axis tracking, this thing would simply replace that. Instead of doing centroid tracking on one star in any of those situations, you would be taking a large part of the field of view of that camera and tracking on that. Okay, it wouldn't work very well if you didn't have sub-exposures. I mean, for example, like my so-called zero drift mode here, because I mean, if you went, unless your mount is a heck of a lot better than my Losmandy G11, if I just let it run, for 15 minutes and then try to tweak it, it is probably so far off, it might be, 5 arc seconds or something away. I couldn't get away with not paying attention to where it is that long. I don't know how you guys, if you have a mount that will let you go for that long without tweaking, well, then you could.
One thing I'll mention is Robert's coming at this more from an exoplanet angle than a astroimaging angle, and what I see as, or maybe a better way to define this is, it's not so much that it gives you the ability to use the same camera or anything like that. To me, you use the same system, but it's multi-star guiding, and it's an alternative to the centroid tracking, which in many different, in a few different cases, particularly undersampled systems, or a few other cases, you might find a benefit to an alternative to centroid tracking. And I know, is it Maxim that was offering multi-star guiding or developing multi-star guiding? It's kind of like that, but in a sense, you're averaging out the error that the stars would give you. So Robert's going to come at it from his angle, and we're going to come at it from another angle because of kind of what we're familiar with. But we definitely are going to cross paths, and we can debate the efficiency, I'll say, of using centroid tracking versus using the full image, excuse me, the image auto guiding. But at the same time, technology has a funny way of getting ahead of the software. And in a sense, his software might be getting ahead of some of the technology, because if we do start seeing cameras that can actually read out while they're acquiring data, then all of a sudden, something like this is going to be much more pertinent, where you can actually use one camera, no off-axis guide or no guide scope, do your imaging. I mean, even CMOS cameras where you're potentially doing lucky imaging for deep sky objects, something that's just kind of on the cusp of what we're getting into right now. But that's the way I approach this, and I've already spoken for too long, but I'm trying to kind of tie it all together into a few of the questions I'm seeing, and that's all I wanted to say. But Robert, there was one question that I was actually wondering similar. How does it deal with trees or clouds or anything like that?
Well, it works pretty well. Well, it's not going to work well with trees where you're obstructed, but it has pretty tremendous sensitivity. I mean, back at the performance curve, oops, back over here, because I have a whole. I mean, suppose I'm taking a 10-second exposure. If the clouds come in the way, I mean, I'm not talking about total obstruction here, but if they attenuate the light, we're going to kind of, in effect, move ourselves back on the curve. You know, even though we're exposing for 10 seconds, our performance will degrade, but it'll still be pretty good. I had one experience where, you know, I'm trying to develop the thing. I run the telescope out there, and oh my God, you know, here's some clouds that, you know, they said it was going to be clear, but the clouds are coming through. Well, I discovered that, man, it's still pretty much locked on there. As long as I could pretty well see them, you know, on the screen, it wasn't budging. Yeah, I think that was pretty well said, Adam. I think that the advantage, I guess maybe, I'm kind of getting the view that you guys aren't that interested in my zero drift mode, but what I think you might be interested in is, like back at the off-axis guider here, the advantage would be you don't have to find that one star you're looking for. You know, almost anything that the guide camera would see, you don't have to rotate the thing to find that guide star. You just point, collect imagery, and start guiding. You know, so no screwing around trying to find the one star of interest. To me finding getting, you know, because I've had experiences where I try to lock on centroid track and it locks onto a hot pixel, or it loses track during the guiding calibration part, and you're saying, oh, you know, I don't need this. So it gets around that.
Mm-hmm. And
should I go on and give my little demo with the program, or you want some more questions?
Go ahead,
okay.
And I'll read through the questions and try and summarize them as I can.
Okay, let me see if I can push my luck and get this to work right here. Let's see. Okay, can you see that? The program just popped up.
Yes, we can.
Okay, and the first thing to do is connect. Okay, so I've just connected to it because the screen's all black. Okay, so what does this do here? We're looking at the wall over here. Boy, is that dark. Let me increase the. I ran this during the daytime. Let's see. Let's increase the exposure time here. Oh, there we go. Okay, and this is just the wall in the room here. Let's see. Let me turn telescope control over here. This is an STI camera. Okay, a little guide camera, and I have it sitting on top of a moonlight focuser, and I'm using the moonlight focuser not to focus, but to lift and lower the camera here. So let me try see if I can do this. Let me try running. Okay, I've just entered what's called the run mode, and what the run mode does is it just keeps getting images one after another. So I use this to do my star alignment. Okay, so you know, I'd start off and say, okay, we're going to, you know, point at Vega, you know, so the mount points. So I use the crosshairs to center it and send it to the next one, or tweak focus. But let me see if I can play with the, okay. Did you notice how the image shifted?
Yes.
Okay, well, what I'm doing is I'm pushing the buttons on the Moonlight focus controller, and it's causing the camera to go up and down a little bit. And the reason I'm going to do that is now I'm going to show you what happens in the guiding operation. Well, I mean, I can't really guide because I'm not hooked, obviously, to a mount here. But all that's going to happen is it's going to be measuring the air in position. Okay, so if you were running it, you would enter some sort of, let's say I'm at 36 degrees declination, and you would go over here and say, okay, my mount has such and such a focal length. I mean, right here is my default of a little over a meter. So you'd set things like that. And if you're storing data, you would, set here's where I want to save my FITS files. Oops, shouldn't have done that. And if you wanted to record them, you would, click on Save Files. Okay, so let me try. Oh, okay. I have to abort the run mode here. Okay, so I quit the run mode, but now let's enter the guide mode. Okay, so let's say I've tweaked the telescope to the position I want, and ready to guide. What do? I just go down here and click on the guide button. Okay, and it's starting to guide. Well, not right now, but what it's showing is it's telling me here are the errors in position. So X represents right ascension, and Y represents declination. Okay, so it's telling me here are the errors. It's starting to plot a graph over here. Now let me just hit the Moonlight focuser button for a second. Okay, you noticed, there we go. You noticed how the deck errors have increased. So I kicked it up about a pixel, which, by the way, this is pretty tricky here because of this optical setup. 1 pixel represents about 0.2 millimeters of shift of the telescope, of the little camera upward. Okay, so let me kick it again. Another one. Let's see what happens. Oh, okay, 2.3 something. Okay, so I kicked it up. So I mean, normally, when it's running properly, the data point should be hugging this line over here. But right now, we're running open loop. The system thinks, well, I've turned off the control here, but it could be sending commands to the relays to making adjustments. But right now, all it's doing is telling us how far it's moved. Let me see if I can knock it down again. Push the button for a second. Okay, now we're down to 1.2. So that's kind of basically. But the thing I'm showing over here is, you notice there aren't any stars. Okay, this is just my wall over here. So I don't need guide stars. And it has, currently, it's kind of limited in the interface. I mean, there's a gain control here that controls the display, just how it doesn't pay attention too much to the controls while it's running. Okay, so we're just about to the end. Okay, well, we just hit 100, and then it suddenly paid attention to the fact I was changing the gain on here. And so there's a few mode controls, like for declination, you can either let it run bidirectionally, let the stars drift upward or drift downward, or you can turn off the deck control entirely. So that's basically what's in here. There are a few other things in here, like I have a mode for doing drift alignment, where you can put it, you can turn off the control of the mount, just let the mount run on its own and watch how it drifts in declination. So, well, I don't know. And there's a report here of how well it tracked. Obviously, it doesn't mean much from what I just did, but so any questions on the my little demo or the talk?
First of all, let me say one thing. For the guys on YouTube, I'm sorry, I just got to the YouTube chat and I didn't realize there were questions posted. I see there must be a lot of new people here because there are a lot of people in the room. The chat that we're talking about is on the astroimagingchannel.com, and it gives you the ability to pop it off, so you could still watch it from YouTube if you choose, or you can just watch it on the astroimagingchannel.com. But I see they're discussing different cameras and how they would get it working with it. I'm sorry, I'm trying to read through some of them. I don't think there's any significant questions in there, though. The only one that I saw, and I think Don Curry was asking, is it possible to auto guide at 3950 millimeters? I'm assuming focal length. And I don't see why not, but if Bob, you have any additional comment on that, you're welcome to.
3950. You mean like with an S big like this?
I'm assuming so. He must have a 14-inch SCT or something, or maybe a large RC.
No, I mean, I don't see any problem here. You need to go back here and set the, if you were using my program here, you know, rather than somebody else's that had the code in it, you need to, you know, change the focal length, because that tells it. I mean, currently, I've kind of hard coded the auto calibration into the software here. So that would have to be entered, that would have to be introduced one way or another to the system. But no, I don't see any reason, anything that would stop it.
And there it is. It just popped up. And this is going to be my comment. Jeff Sievert saying, fascinating. I never thought I'd see someone auto guide on a wall. And that's the really cool thing about this, is it's not using centroiding. Now, you might ask yourself, well, there's always stars up there. But some of us, and we're going to hear a little bit more about this in a couple weeks, are doing solar imaging. And when we do solar imaging, we may be doing videos or animations, in which case being able to auto guide on the sun could be really beneficial. And they sell these additional, they sell solar auto guiders, but hey, you know, I have a camera, I have a white light filter. The only thing I don't have is a Mac, unfortunately. But perhaps in the future we'll see an algorithm like this pop into something like a PhD or one of the other programs, because it's nice to have alternatives when for some reason you come up with a scenario that what you want to do isn't possible with what you have. And that was one of the things that impressed me about this program. And yeah, there are lots of comments about even if you don't have a Mac, or even if you, it may not work with your system as it is. It was interesting learning just about the math and how that's going to work. So just a cool, different approach to that. Someone's asking whether the slides will be posted somewhere. And Bob, I don't remember whether you sent me a copy of the presentation, but if you do, I'll have them posted on YouTube. So,
oh, okay, sure. I'll email you the latest and greatest version in PDF.
Perfect. And make sure your email's in there so I don't have to post that publicly on YouTube. Otherwise, you'll start getting spammed from everywhere.
Well, I mean, can I send it to your personal email?
Send it to my personal email, and I'll put it, yeah, and I'll post the PDF,
okay.
and I'll post it.
Okay, I'll do that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a cool approach. Like I said earlier, as technology changes, as Lucky Imaging gets more popular, there's going to be better ways to do things that you wouldn't have anticipated. And I'm not saying that this is definitely going to replace centroid imaging, but someone's going to come across a system or a new sensor that does something special, and they're going to have to take advantage of it. And guiding like this seems interesting. I seem to remember doing a session where someone was guiding using wavelets, and I can't quite remember who it was. I don't know if anyone in the room remembers. Was it Gisem doing it with K-Stars Indy on the Arduino? I don't know if anyone remembers that, but it was the closest thing that I could think of to this method of guiding.
Well, hey, Adam, you mentioned the solar. I was curious as to how short an exposure can this program work with? I mean, you know, if you're talking about solar imaging, you're talking about video types of thing. Is that something this program can be adapted to?
Well, this program doesn't really, it just ask for an image from the camera. So it doesn't really care, about the exposure. It tells the camera, give me, I want a 1/10 of a second or whatever, and it gives the, it waits to get the response. So it doesn't really, as long as the camera can handle that, there's no issue.
Right now, you said it currently only works with S-Big cameras. I happen to be the lucky one that has, well, I shouldn't say that. I did have an S-Big Autoguider. Now I'm actually using a Lodestar. But does it work with the S-Big Autoguider as well, or just the CCDs?
The CCDs.
The CCDs, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so now I'm thinking about this as well. There may be, obviously this program's under development, and if Robert wants to team up with somebody that's already got an auto-guiding program or wants to develop further, there are lots of options. You know how this hobby is. We probably have 20 people watching this video who could probably write an auto-guiding software themselves. It's just someone has to have the desire and the time. But you could probably use, if it's only compatible with an S-Big right now, you may be able to use some sort of screen capture program that would, obviously you have to develop this yourself, but that would import the video frames, and then the algorithm would work the same way on it.
Well, I'd be glad to share the algorithm that replaces the Centroid tracking. I mean, personally, I'm just not that excited about writing programs that work on Windows and support, Apogee cameras and everybody's and their brother's cameras here. I mean, that part, and developing GUI, so that part. But the basic algorithm, I'm willing to work with other people on and try to help the community out.
How processing-wise, how much processing does it take for the 48 transforms?
Oh, it's surprisingly quick here. It's for one thing, if you had a very large CCD, you don't have to be doing 4096 by 4096 FFTs. Like my 6 256s work just fine. Now, typically, in timing this out, what I discovered is it takes about 1.3 seconds between exposures, and less than a third of the second is spent doing the calculation. The rest of it is downloading the image and tweaking the mount. Actually, the thing that surprises me is because my approach to controlling the mount is fairly simple-minded, I have to wait for the first. It's basically like you're adjusting the paddle controllers. Like you push the right ascension button, then you push the deck button, and you have to wait for it to complete on each of those. So typically, it's like about a 1.3 seconds between exposures. So as I said, it would be a lousy situation to have, let's say a 1 second exposure, and then you have to wait another 1.3 for the next one. But but that could be changed if you have CMOS cameras or cameras that can download more quickly. You can reduce that lag time, and maybe there's a faster way to tweak the mount. Things like that. But the FFT part, just maybe a 1/10 of a second. It's down in that range. Even doing like 6 256s happens. I'm taking advantage on the Macintosh of Apple's Accelerate framework that does it very extremely fast.
I saw on chat, it just kind of hit me. S-Big does have a dual sensor camera, so that would work perfectly with this. The guiding sensor is built into the basically, it doesn't have the same field, but there's no pick-off prism. It's just built right into the camera. But yeah, a few suggestions from the chat, or from the comments, I should say. Maybe PhD wouldn't be interested in the algorithm, and possibly the Sequence Generator Pro guys. I don't know if they're looking to do an actual guiding option, but it's possible. So in a sense, this was a bit about the theory behind auto guiding, but at the same time, I know Roberts would be glad to have a developer, an existing developer that has a program that's already going, that would be able to incorporate it in it. Steven's asking, is the algorithm written in Objective-C?
Is it written in Objective-C? It's written just in plain C, basically. No C++ or not the app. No, I mean, back in my Xcode project, the Objective-C just makes a call of a C function, and that's where it is. The only funny thing that I have in my present algorithm is because I base this on what the numerical recipes people did long time ago. I'm using one-based arrays, which I'm sure a lot of people would say, what? Why are you doing that? But it's simply because of that history. But that could be changed.
Great.
So in other words, what I'm saying is I could just hand you the routines, or the basic methodology could be slightly modified into a different framework.
Well, I know PhD is open source right now, so if anyone out there is watching and is working on anything PhD, I'm sure Robert would be glad to hand it over to you. You guys might, you know how this works. You might have an idea that no one, an idea or a concept that no one's anticipating. The other question is this work public domain? And
well, it should be, because I haven't made any effort to patent it here. I just since I'm not terribly interested in trying to make a company here and compete with people who have programs that already support many cameras. It is, and in fact, there's a paper. I came up with this basic methodology back in the late 1990s, and I have incorporated into my own programs for doing planetary lucky imaging. Okay, but it was only recently that I decided, well, will this work for just stars rather than planets? Because I was a little skeptical that maybe the signal to noise would be too poor. So I gave it a try, and I discovered, oh, hey, it's the performance is still pretty good, even though compared with trying to image a planet, it's a lot less, but it's still adequate. But I did some Google searching, and I found a paper from a guy named something Stone, and he wasn't talking about using it for auto-guiding telescopes, but he was talking about measuring the shift of images. And it's basically the same methodology. I mean, there are some slight differences that I'm doing than him, but the basic idea is the same. So I guess I would say that it's in the public domain. What I'm trying to do is to be the guy who says, hey, why don't we use this in amateur astronomy?
Yeah, and Bob T, this will probably be the last comment, but it was a great presentation. But Bob T is mentioning Gaston Bodat from Innovations Foresight had a post on March 1st about what he calls full frame guiding. And Gaston obviously developed the on-axis guider. But we're not sure whether this is similar to what you're doing, but it sounds close.
Really? Is he talking about a software algorithm rather than just using his dichroic beam splitter system?
Well, so with it, he's got the hardware version of it, but I know a lot of people will use. I don't know what he's using for his actual auto guiding. He has Starlock, but I think from what I remember, he still suggests, or he still at least uses or demonstrates with PhD. So
would this use Starlock? Would it still be using Starlock?
Well, let me think about that. Well, Starlock, is Starlock a guiding program or just the focus lock? The focus?
It's the focusing part.
Yeah, so I think what he does is he splits the video output so that some of it goes to the focusing part and some of it goes to PhD. I don't know if he actually has a guiding program himself or if he just has the hardware and then you pick your guiding program from there.
I think it's called Focus Lock.
Focus Lock. That's correct.
Lock.
Oh yeah, Starlock. What's that? That's SBIG's starless auto guiding, right? I think so. I don't know. There's too
Well, I mean, the focus lock is the bank is still the configuration with the dichoic beam splitter, and he's taking advantage of the. It's kind of funny. He's taking advantage of the fact that the beam splitter introduces astigmatism in the through beam to the guide camera, so that as you go through focus, the astigmatism, the elongation of the image shifts 90 degrees when you do that, so he can kind of unambiguously tell which direction you're going in or out of focus.
Yep.
But I don't think that's in any way similar to what I'm talking about. I mean, what I'm talking about is a software algorithm that processes the entire image and calculates shifts. So I don't. I'll have to take a look at what he's got on his site to see if there's anything different. But it doesn't sound like it.
It sounds like it's something new. It doesn't sound like focus lock. It sounds like it actually has a full image auto guiding. So I don't know. If it was introduced 3.1 or you just posted about it 3.1, then maybe it's something brand new. We'll have to see.
Yeah, I'll have to take a look at it.
Yep. Just saw that comment and then it disappeared for me. With regard to the algorithm, did you use any math libraries beyond math.h in C?
Math. Did I use any libraries? Well, on the Mac, I'm using, like I said, to actually do the FFT calculation. I didn't write that code myself. I could have used the numerical recipes routine, but what I am using is, I mean, since I'm doing it on a Mac, I'm using Xcode, and Apple supplies a bunch of libraries, and I'm using libraries in what they call the Accelerate framework. I can't remember, they're like funny names like FFT something or other, but there's a couple of functions that actually do the FFT calculation. What I'm doing is, once the FFT has been done, I am then doing basically a least squares fit of that slope region in my own code. Okay, so that's the part I'm supplying. I send it off to the FFT, I get it back. And the whole trick in doing the algorithm is knowing what's at what spatial frequency. You have to know when the data comes back to you, this is at this place in the map of two-dimensional spatial frequency. So it's that manipulation and doing that least squares fit.
Awesome. Somebody's asked, how is this different from extended feature correlation guide method in the SkyX? And to be honest, I'm Googling that myself right now.
No, I don't know. I don't know how. I guess it's a question of, does it work on stars and nebula and I don't know. I don't know how theirs works. I mean, you could approach this from different approaches. Like somebody suggested doing a plate solve, for example, and you could plate solve the stars, compute an aim point, and functionally get the same thing. Except the problem, the thing is, image autoguiding doesn't care where you're pointing. It doesn't need to know, that star is such and such a star. It doesn't care about that, it'll solve any stars even if they're not in the catalog. But yeah, I mean, there's more than, you could multiple centroid track. I mean, there's more than one way to solve this. I'm putting forth a particular way, and I find it attractive just from the standpoint that you click guide, it takes the first frame as a reference, computes shifts to all the others, and it doesn't require you to basically know anything about what you're looking at. Like I showed you, I can track on the wall here, so it doesn't require that you know that this star is such and such, or it has this right ascension and declination. But I don't want to say it's the only way to do it. I mean, I'm sure other people can come up with other ways.
Yeah, it's just nice to have options, particularly in this hobby when sometimes something just doesn't work out for you, or you get comfortable with something. But
well, this won't solve all problems. I mean, for example, if you wanted to image a comet and wanted to track on the comet, I don't have a way of just seeing that part of the image. It would, if I ran it as it is, it would just track on everything that's there, the stars, and if the comet was moving during the picture, it would move. So I'm not trying to say it solves every possible problem. I mean, there you might be better off just tracking on the nucleus of the comet.
Right, right. The Steve Sagarian also asking about the math libraries. Are they cross-compiled or available for Windows?
Well, the Accelerate framework wouldn't be cross-compiled here, but I mean, I could give somebody basically the code that does it. It's just in generic C. The only thing that you would have to do is come up with a FFT routine and map the spatial frequencies in the right places. That's the whole trick. I mean, in other words, you could use somebody else's, like on Windows. I don't know exactly what's available there, but you could use one of the really hot FFT routines, I'm sure, that are available. But then the only trick in trying to make it work right is you would have to, understand, that in this position in memory represents this spatial frequency, and I have to treat it, in the equations that solve the least squares. You have to understand, what spatial frequency you're at. But if you can do that, you can. So basically, what I'm saying is you can use anything, any available FFT routine on that platform, but you might have to do some massaging of, of the code to, The trouble with FFTs is there's very little standardization. It's like people have factors of 2 pi or don't, or here's a minus sign, or things are laid out in memory in different ways. So it's kind of sorting through those details. That's what you'd have to worry about to get it working right.
All right. One more question, and then maybe we'll call it a night. Will planes or a satellite in the field of view throw it off?
Well, one little thing that I'm doing is I'm using 6 256 squared regions across the field of view. And what I'm actually doing is I'm taking a median calculation of them. And what a median is basically doing is it's a sorting operation. You sort them and you take the middle value. So the upshot is if the satellite went through and it went through part of it, the median calculation would reject that. So basically it probably wouldn't even care if the satellite went through. It would cause some maybe funny measurement in one part, and the median calculation would say, yeah, that doesn't match the other guys, so throw it out. So I think it would be pretty robust. I mean, unless the entire field of view was clobbered with something, then you're out of luck on that frame. But otherwise, if it's just a little, like for cosmic, I did that because of cosmic ray hits. You get a cosmic ray hit in one region, and okay, it's going to cause a little bit of an error, but the median calculation says, yeah, forget it, and it's robust.
Awesome. Yeah, I can tell our viewers here, they like the combination of, I don't know if it's theoretical and developing stuff, but they like to know how the guts of this stuff work. So it was a really good presentation. We had a ton of viewers on tonight, and it kind of showed in the comments as well. So Robert, I do want to thank you again for coming on. For anyone out there who is a developer or who's interested in either hearing more about it, as soon as Robert gets me the email with the presentation, I will post it on YouTube in the description of this video. And if you wanted to get a hold of Robert, then you can get a hold of him via his email. That'll be in that. And I don't know. We'll see where this goes. It's one of those things where we have to feel it out and see what's going to become of it. But really, for a few approaches, could be a great opportunity. But again, yeah, thank you all for coming. One more thing, and I have my note here. I don't have a presentation scheduled for next week yet, but I've already had 2 requests that we have a discussion on the new CMOS cameras that are coming out. So I don't know if there are a few of our viewers that have CMOS cameras, anyone that would want to come on and give us, I don't know, a 5-minute review, or if we had a few people with them and they wanted to come on and just kind of have a collective review, it'd be a great topic for next week. You guys can contact me via the website, theastroimagingchannel.com. Just click contact and you'll see the email there. And it'd be a good topic. If we don't get anyone, then I'll come up with something midweek. But we have a nice series of presentations lined up for basically the whole month. Lots of cool stuff coming. So yeah, thanks again, Robert. And guys,
You're welcome.
we'll see you in the next few weeks. Good night, guys.